Yeah, so we're going to just dive into it. And so, Taylor, I don't know how you kind of view the SEC as a whole right now. I kind of have like three different tiers where I have like returning guys that are starting. I have new guys who are going to be starters, whether they just won a competition or whether they haven't been named yet, but you just assume they are. And then I have another group where it's like open competition. Is that kind of fair to say? Three different tiers as far as like where each guy kind of lays in?
Yeah, for sure. And I also think this year is interesting because there really isn't, a lot has been made of JT Daniels.
Yeah.
A lot, there's always hype around past couple years for Bo Nix, but there's not a surefire, this guy's going to be a top 5 pick, powerhouse quarterback in the SEC. I think there's a lot of guys that could be. I think you may get a guy like a Joe Burrow type rise. I think about, I know you're really high on Bazelot. I think, there's some guys that can jump up, but there's nobody coming into the season where you're like, this is going to be a top 5 pick. And that makes it interesting out of the SEC. I think you've got to prove up Bryce Young now at Alabama. So a lot that needs to be proven across the board for most of these schools.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting. There's so much just turnover. Like you said, there's only not an absolute guy. Like Bama, besides when they had Tua, he was the guy, and then Joe Burrow busted on the scene. Kyle Trask busted on the scene. Mac Jones, you can say, kind of busted on the scene, right? So I think it's a good point. There's not like an actual just straight up dude. But with that said, there are some returning guys who probably lead the pack. And we got Matt Corral, JT Downs, I think Connor Bazelot are your guys who have established themselves as starters. You can probably throw in Bo Nix too. But as far as like more of an upper tier guys in the SEC, I think Corral, Daniels, and Bazelot are kind of the guys I view for. And I just want to take a second just to kind of talk about Daniels and Corral first, because they're probably, when you look at any SEC rankings and lists, they're kind of number 2. And I think they have some similarities but differences at the same time. But I'm just really interested to see JT Daniels in a full season, right? He only played 4 games last year. It's been literally, 2-3 years since he played a full season because he got hurt in 2019 on the first game of the season. So I think you can say all you want. It's good that he finished strong, but I don't know if you know what the Georgia's offense is going to look like. But I think it's safe to say they're going to push the ball downfield a bit more. It's going to open up some things. But I think those are probably your top 3 returning guys. I don't know if you have anyone else you want to throw in too there. But as far as like returning dudes, I kind of have those 3 guys: Bazelot, Daniels, and Corral as my top 3 guys as returning.
I would probably put Bo in there as well, just because of his potential upside. He's got to prove it, and he was inconsistent last year, but he's got as much talent as anybody at the position in the country, not just in the conference. I agree with you. I think about, you look at LSU now. You have that job is completely up in the air. You have Kentucky completely up in the air. Alabama returning a new starter. But you got, this group. We'll talk about the 3 that you had clustered in there. JT Daniels, 4-0 in those games that he played last season. Agree that health is important, right? You got to be on the field. And we go into it again for Georgia, where is this team going to be able to knock off Alabama? I mean, it's been the same thing for 10 years now. We'll find out week 1. I mean, we'll find out immediately when they play Clemson, are they for real or not? And then Matt Corral, to me, is one of the most interesting players in the country, not just at the quarterback position. I got a chance to watch him up close in Thibodaux, Louisiana at the Manning camp, and was really surprised. I mean, he's got all the stats and accolades. You can tell he can drive the ball downfield, but seeing him in person, I was really surprised at how strong his arm was. And it's got a little bit of a different motion. He doesn't take it all the way back. It kind of stays not almost in that Phillip Rivers spot. He's not as sidearm as Phillip was, but it stays right here, and then it comes out like a rocket.
Yeah.
And I came away from that weekend watching him really impressed just with his raw talent. And Ole Miss for a while now, that's been a sort of a wait and see as well. So I agree with you. I think those guys, that's your kind of cream of the crop right now, especially as the returners. But I would put Bo Nix in there as well, because if they can find consistency out of him, he can be a special player.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you with Nix. I think that's fair to put him in. And like you said, consistency is so big. It's not necessarily he doesn't have big playability. It's that short to intermediate stuff. It's just, hey, take what the defense gives you. and how much was on him and how much was on Malzahn's offense. I think you can debate it, but I think it's fair to say there's probably some on both, or blame on both. So it's interesting to see how he fits in Harsin's offense. And back to Corral real quick, because I think when you watch film of him, it's interesting you say that he has a stronger arm in person. He has a kind of an uncanny ability to fit the ball into tight spaces and tight windows. Like, he does a very good job at that. People always talk about his turnover issues. He had, I think, 14 interceptions last year, but 11 of those picks came in 2 games. So I don't even know if he has a turnover issue. It's just whenever things go bad, it's like snowball. So I think if you can just kind of eliminate, hey, if I have one bad pick, so what? That doesn't need to turn to 4 or 5, because he had 2 games over 5 picks. So I think it's not even a turnover issue, but it's eliminating bad play after the initial bad play. And I think that he could really take that next step, especially in Kiffin's offense year 2, full off season. So I'm right up there with you with Corral. Super talented and super interesting, right? Like, so he has the potential to be maybe the best in the SEC, right? You think so?
Yeah. I really do, and especially in that system. Turnovers, for the most part, you see it at the pro level. You see it at every level, high school, college, pro. There's a reason young quarterbacks turn the ball over a lot. And part of playing the position and getting time and reps under your belt is the growth that comes with that. And he's going to have some of that. He's going to realize, I don't have to get it all back if we're behind in a game in one play, right? Let's string some stuff together. Let's string some scoring drives together. Hopefully they get improved defensive play so they're not in these 50-something to 40-something shootouts where you get down 2 scores. And that's where some of those turnovers came from, was I got to get us back in this game single-handedly. And having a defense helps with that. I also agree with you. He has his accuracy, especially downfield, some of the best in the country. And mentally for him, the only other thing I'll say, I would hope in his case that if Plumlee is involved, that it's not at the quarterback position. You could tell last year it would throw off momentum on drives and in the rhythm of the game. When Plumlee would come in for a couple plays, it just didn't work. It didn't flow. And admittedly, I'm against any sort of 2 quarterback system. I hate it. I think you got to pick a guy and go. And if you're going to pull him. But the back and forth yo-yo, I've never agreed with it. I don't think it works. And I hope that they truly give him the keys, and that Plumlee, however they use him, it's not at the quarterback position if Corral is going to be their guy.
Yeah. No, that's good, man. It's interesting with the 2 quarterback system too, because as we kind of transition to the next tier of like the new starters, I think we could see some 2 quarterback play in one of these teams, and I'll explain in a second. But your new stars that we have, and these are guys, again, just to review, that have either been named the starter or it's safe to assume they're going to be the starter, right? We know Bryce Young's going to be the starter, even though it hasn't been officially said, hey, he's the starting quarterback at Alabama. But your next tier, we got Bryce Young with Alabama, Luke Doty with South Carolina, who's been named the starter, but I think you could see some 2 quarterback play there with Jason Brown, the transfer from St. Francis. We have Emery Jones from Florida, who I'm super high on, KJ Jefferson from Arkansas, I'm super high on him as well. And then Max Johnson, who, again, I'm super high on as well. Maybe I'm too much of an optimist, but with the news of Miles Brennan, unfortunately, his injury, Max Johnson probably is safe to put in as the new starters. Are there any guys that stick out right off the bat here? I know you have some interesting takes on Bryce Young and the Bama situation, but we got like 5 or 6 guys who could be really, really good in this category.
Yeah, Kentucky, South Carolina, those are wait and sees to me. Arkansas, I love what the momentum they have right now. I think that's a team that could beat Texas early on in the year and really get some momentum behind them. I think Max Johnson and LSU, though, to me is the one that is the most interesting, because he had this massive drop-off from 2019 to 2020. Part of that was obviously they had whatever the number was of guys that were drafted in the overall on that from the national championship team. You have this massive drop-off. Then Miles gets hurt last year, which you feel for the kid. Back-to-back seasons, he's had serious injuries. Had that abdominal injury that had to have surgery on. Now he's out again. But that LSU team, this is a pivotal year for Ed Orgeron, which is crazy to say because it's just 2 years ago. This is one of the greatest teams in the history of college football. And now it's after as bad as last year was, that is not a patient fan base. And I think it, in some ways, I think it actually makes their life a little easier that you know who your guy is now. Yeah. So through camp, there is no back and forth. There really isn't a QB battle. It's, hey, Max, we're turning the keys over to you, and let's figure this thing out. And you hope that LSU gets back to where they were. I mean, that opener last year where Mississippi State goes in there, who was terrible the entire season, and Mississippi State is dicing them apart week one. It's like, what is going on? I think hopefully you see LSU return to form, and I think Max could be a huge part of that for them.
Yeah, I'm with you with Max, especially with the talent they have around him, right? Like, I may be able to go there and throw a touchdown pass to those receivers. I don't know. But in all seriousness, though, like his ability and you can tell he's an NFL quarterback's kid, right? He can process defense really well. Everything's on point as far as like technique goes, and he's got athleticism as well. So I'm high on Max Johnson as well. I think you're spot on there. Another guy I like is Emery Jones, for the simple fact I think he's like a good whenever you play Mississippi State, Dan Mullen was the head coach with Dak Prescott. So I don't want to compare him too much to Dak because they are different quarterbacks, but I think he fits more of Dan Mullen's ideal quarterback. That makes sense, who can run a little bit and he can be creative. So I think we'll see some kind of creativity with the offense with Dan Mullen and Emery Jones, but Emery Jones can throw it a bit too. So I'm excited to see him like actually start a game as opposed to just be in like spot duty, if you will. But I'm high on Emery Jones. What you got in the Florida quarterback?
I'm big on him as well. And in the Dan Mullen's offense, I think that is a coach that it works well in their scheme if your quarterback can run. Yeah. And Emery can do that. Yeah. He was a big part of their offense in the ground game when he was in. And you don't need to lean on that because he can drive the ball downfield. But I think in a Dan Mullen's offense, it has always been beneficial if your QB can move around, and he certainly can. And he's another guy that having some consistency is going to be huge. I mean, that you could say that about anybody. The quarterback position is about consistency, getting reps, getting through stretches of the season, the highs and the lows. And I think he's another guy that's going to benefit tremendously from that.
Absolutely, man. And then kind of the last guy I want to spend some time talking on in this group is Bryce Young, because I think he has the potential to be the best quarterback in 2021 in the SEC. Even if he plays average with the weapons he has around him, he could put up the best numbers. But I think he is extremely talented, and I think he's going to be in a position to succeed. There's no reason to think an Alabama quarterback is not going to have a good season based off the past 3 or 4 seasons. But I think you've got some interesting kind of takes and just some good stuff you've broken down over Bryce Young and kind of the former quarterbacks. You want to dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, so let's take it back a few years. I have some friends of mine that are involved in the Elite 11 world. Mac Jones comes through that world, and I remember at the time hearing, I can't believe that this kid was offered by Alabama. He just didn't stand out. There were a number of kids. This was nothing like a Tua in terms of talent. And you see, I mean, he's not physically impressive, right? You see what he became over his time in Alabama. I use him as the example because I feel like Alabama just gets their own category. And they have for a while with the dominant run that they've had for, 12 years. But Bryce Young, I think he's second team all conference, and we don't know what he can do really. And I think it's deserved because it's almost like it doesn't even have anything to do with him, right? If Nick Saban can take Mac Jones and make him an All-American first-round pick to the Patriots, well, Bryce Young is more talented than he was. So I almost give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, for most quarterbacks, it's the opposite. I'm not normally the optimist for quarterbacks because it's such a hard position. You're going to have to go prove it, and you got to figure it out. Whereas at Alabama, it's like, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you're going to end up being an All-American and throw for 3,500 yards and probably go in the first round whenever you come out. And that's the law. Gone are the days of Brody Croyle and AJ McCarron where we're 10-7 in a mud fight. We're gone from that, right? These guys are slinging it around, and Saban knows it. You hear him talk at coaches clinics now. It's an offensive game, and they have pivoted to that. And the quarterback position there has been lights out for 4 classes now.
Unbelievable. No, that's an interesting point. That's some good insight there. So that's a good group. I like KJ Jefferson as well. I think he's got talent for Arkansas, but that could be like the most interesting group. Or I wouldn't be surprised if 1 or 2 of the guys we just talked about are the best quarterbacks in the SEC and kind of take over the returning dudes, if you will. But I want to go on to kind of open competitions. I want to throw a few things your way because we got several open competitions going on, almost half the conference. The ones that stick out to me are Tennessee, because you got a 4-man race essentially, even though I think it's more of a 2 to 3-man battle. We have Texas A&M, which is always interesting, especially in our neck of the woods, being in Texas. And then I think the other kind of big competition in my mind is Mississippi State has an interesting one as well. So I'm going to throw those 3 competitions at you. Do you find one of those competitions more interesting or intriguing? Do you think one of those guys could be a potential really good quarterback that wins it? Again, Tennessee, A&M, and Mississippi State all with open competitions.
Yeah, to me, and I'm not just saying this because we live right down the road, but it's A&M and Haynes King. And the reason, and it has nothing to do really with the other quarterbacks, it's A&M with what they have coming back. If they get B- B average quarterback play, they may be a 10-11 game win type of team. They've got that much talent, and the schedule for them lines up to have a pretty phenomenal season. I waited like A&M fans did for Kellen Mond's entire career to flip the switch and become the all-world talent that he had to become that all-world quarterback. And I don't think it ever really happened.
Yeah.
I thought he was wildly inconsistent. His numbers against the ranked opponents his entire career and even through his senior year were just never very good. And that's what A&M has missed for a long time. They're very similar, honestly, to Texas. Since Johnny's been gone, they have struggled with quarterback play. And if they can get, like, again, just be average quarterback play out of that position this year, they are that good that I think they could have a monster year. Anything beyond that, we're talking about a really special year where they will be competing for the SEC West if they can get good quarterback play. So to me, that makes it the most interesting.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. They got stud running game. They got good receiver. They got 2 of the best tight ends. If Cooper Kupp is healthy, he could be a stud tight end. So, and the only thing I have with the A&M offense is it's Jimbo's offense. It takes time. He puts it on the quarterbacks, right? So you have to process information, and so maybe there's a learning curve. But at the same time, you could argue from the point of view that Haynes King and Zach Calzada, because I think Calzada's a talented kid. I think Haynes King's probably the favorite, but I still think there's a competition. But they've had the past few years to watch and get mental reps, even though it's not the same as playing. There's still some value there. So that's my only hesitation is Jimbo's offense. Are they able to pick it up and process it? And then real quick, I want to touch on Mississippi State. I don't know if you had a chance to watch Will Rogers much, but Jack Abraham, I know you're kind of familiar with, covering some G5 football on Conference USA. And it wouldn't surprise me to see Jack Abraham go in and get that starting job. With Mike Leach's air raid offense, a lot of people get kind of confused. They think air raid, they think chunk the ball deep, let's chunk it, as opposed to it's all small stuff. It's putting the defense in bad situations, just getting the guy the ball in open space. That's something Abraham did really well at Southern Miss. So it wouldn't surprise me. I don't know how you feel about it, but it wouldn't surprise me to see him go and actually get that job. Or if Rogers struggles, Mike Leach will pull him out in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah. What's interesting for this group in Mississippi State is I would say don't hold your breath and don't worry about it no matter which quarterback ultimately gets chosen, because you're likely to see the other one in week 1 anyway. You will probably see both. You'll probably see both again in week 2. And to your point also, Jack Abraham has plenty of arm to be in that offense. I mean, go back through the quarterbacks of the Texas Tech era when they were really humming. Graham Harrell could throw it about 45 yards tops. So, and is one of the all-time leading passers to ever play the game. This is a big year for Mississippi State. That is also not a very patient fan base. And last year was horrendous. I mean, after they beat LSU, defense is figured out, if we just back off and play catch and let everything stay in front of us, you're really not going to be able to get behind us, and then we'll clamp down in the red zone. And that's exactly what happened. They stopped scoring points.
Yeah.
They'd march the ball down the field, and they'd either turn the ball over, they'd get a sack that would derail a drive, or they'd get in the red zone, and they couldn't score. Yeah. So this is going to be a big season for them. They need some momentum quickly, because it's another young program that you lose a few early on. That momentum starts going the wrong direction. But I would not be surprised. I agree with you. I would not be surprised if Jack Abraham won that job.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's a good point about Mike Leach just not being afraid to interchange quarterbacks, almost like a chess piece, right? Just
Ever.
I'll put you in the spot real quick and myself on the spot. So I'm going to give you the first round pick. We get 3 rounds. Okay. So there's going to be 6 quarterbacks taken off the board. I'm going to give you the first round pick. You take a guy, I take a guy, and we'll just keep going back and forth. And so basically our 6 top quarterbacks in the SEC that we think not going into 2021, but like after the season, right? Like who will be the top 6, and you can weigh that with numbers, stats, wins, whatever. But it's kind of our 6 guys. So I'm going to give you the first round pick. I'll go in and vice versa.
I'm going to go Matt Corral, number 1. I think if he puts up – he has the ability to have a similar rise that Burrow did a couple of years ago. Now, they're not going to have the same run. They're not going to go undefeated and win the national championship. They don't have the team for that. But if he cuts down on the turnovers, I think he could be a 1 overall pick.
Yeah, that's big time. I'm going to go with the guy who may be the richest financially of this group, Bryce Young. Just because the points you alluded to, he's being put in such a good position that even if he doesn't play up to the standards, I think he is going to put up some good numbers, and he's such a talented cast around him. So I'm going Bryce Young with my number 1 pick, and I'll throw it back to you for round number 2.
Yeah, I'll go JT Daniels. I think JT, if he stays healthy, that's what everybody's waiting on, right? Yeah. He's got all the talent in the world. Going 4-0 in the games that he did appear in last year was really impressive. And Georgia's hovering at that 5 spot where it's, again, same as it has been. If they knock off Alabama, all of a sudden he vaults up into – I mean, he could be a 1 overall pick. So I'll go JT Daniels.
I'm going to go Connor Bazelot with my number 2. Probably the most underrated quarterback maybe in the nation. I think he could have a big year this year. And the fact that he plays at Mizzou, you wouldn't hear a ton about it, right? So I think he's a versatile guy. He's athletic when he needs to. He fits that Mizzou offense really good. And I think you're just going to see him get better and better with the offense that how do you pronounce his last name? Darkowicz, Eli, I don't even know how to
Drinkowitz.
Yeah. With the offense Drinkowitz runs, I think he fits it perfectly. So I'm going with Connor Bazelot as my number 2 guy. Let's go 1 more each.
It's not a dark horse. Everybody knows who he is. I'll go Bo Nix because if he gets it figured out and gets some consistency, he's got all the talent in the world. And if Auburn goes on a run, everything runs through Alabama, right? If they beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl and they have a 10-11 win season and he's consistent, that's another guy that you could see he'd be a late first-round pick. You could absolutely see that.
Yeah. Right, so this one's tough. I think I'm going to go Emery Jones. It was between him and Max Johnson for me. I'm just taking Emery Jones just for the simple fact he's got Dan Mullen. Max Johnson doesn't. There's still some questions despite all the talent on LSU. And I think the fact Emery Jones has Dan Mullen is only going to kind of optimize him. So just to kind of recap, you took Corral, I took Young, you took Daniels, I took Bazelot, you took Bo Nix, and I took Emery Jones. So it'll be interesting to see how they all do at the end of the year, dude. But man, any other quarterback kind of talk you want to dive into with the SEC? We missed any topics? I think we kind of hammered it pretty good. But if there's anything else you want to dive into, man, I'm all ears. I'm ready to roll.
Man, it's going to be a fun year. Shout out Ken Seals at Vanderbilt. That's the only guy I think we left off. Yeah. Played a bunch as a freshman. I think he started the entire season for them as a true freshman. So, we'll see. It's always a wait and see with the Vanderbilt. Wish nothing but the best for them, and would love to see them. I always root. I'm a Rice guy, right? I root for the nerdy schools. So, but no, I think it's a good crop of quarterbacks, and it's a fun group of storylines to track early on in the season. I mean, there's going to be some surprises. Somebody will jump up, and we'll have all of a sudden this is a NFL guy, a first couple round guy that we weren't thinking about. So it's going to be a fun year.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like the draft we just had, everyone we talked about could be first round pick if they excel. You know what I mean? So even though there's a lot of turnover, a lot of interesting storylines, I think you're right, dude. I can't wait. Taylor, tell everyone to find you real quick on Twitter and all that kind of fun stuff that I don't know how to intro into. So
yeah, on Twitter, T McCarg 16, MCHARGUE. And I'm on Instagram also, but I'm boring on there. So Twitter, T McCarg 16.
All right, guys, y'all heard it. Me and Taylor would do this throughout the season, some quarterback breakdowns, some previews. But if you like the video, guys, please consider subscribing, like, comment, all that fun YouTube stuff. And we'll see you next time on our next quarterback-related video.